Virginia, thank you for taking a minute out for the show today. I appreciate
Mhm.
it.
Sure.
So before we get into your world, to your book, I want to know first and foremost, 5 years ago this pandemic was raging, sent so many things into different places that we didn't expect. So ultimately, how did you survive the global pandemic, and how much of it has radiated into your life in 2025?
Yeah. I looked for the silver linings. And one of the silver linings was uh, said to myself, okay, what have I always wanted to do that I've never had time for? Because I'm staying at home, because I'm in the bandwidth where people were dying, alone on ventilators in the hospital. So I made a little list and I said, writing. I've written off and on, but I'm getting serious. So I started writing for publication, serious, really. And this book actually was one of the picture books that I wrote a lot. I wrote a middle grade and I don't know, like 12 picture books during that time. And so it was a silver lining. And how it's affected me, uh, I'm still wary. There's another strain, or what do you want to call it, of COVID going around in California now. And I have every vaccination you can get.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think we've put it in the rear view mirror so much. I haven't heard about this strand, but it's still out. It's still, I mean, I remember clearly as it was winding down, so to speak, kind of from a public perspective, they were like, this is never going to go away. I mean, there's always going to be some level,
absolutely.
some viral strand that's going to be out there.
Yeah.
So let's get to the heart and soul of what you've done before being a writer and
Mhm.
being a writer now. And to do that, kids always get the truth out of us in their own way. So I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of 12-year-olds,
Yes.
career day. The kid in the back of the
Oh,
room is like, hey,
oh.
what do you do for a living? What's your answer?
Well, I'm a retired teacher. I retired in 2010, but I've never stopped working. I'm a school psychologist now, 2 days a week, part-time.
Yeah.
And the rest of the time I devote to writing, and school visits and things like that, And one of the purposes of the book is to touch uh, children learning about hydrogeology because they're future voters. And California needs water infrastructure. Everywhere does, but California especially, because of 70% of the little tiny bit of rain we get. We got a lot of rain last night, actually, which is weird. It flows off into the ocean. So,
Yeah. Well, what I don't think people understand, I used to work in produce when I was in high school and got really into
mhm.
it, and every box was from California.
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah,
all of those fruits and vegetables need one thing copiously. So
yeah,
just with that alone, and then you look at all of the wildfires and how they run out of control and what's needed and all
yeah,
of that, it's like there's
yeah,
such a, I mean, water, it's like something that people don't realize. It's like it's weird. I remember I covered a story early in my journalistic career, and it was about flooding, and that was like the number one damage of anything that's happened to humans. You would think it would be fire or something
yeah,
else, but it's water, and it's what we're made of. We need it all. It's like water
yeah,
is such an enormous part of our
right.
reality, you
Yeah.
know?
No, I know. I know. And 70% or yeah, 70% of the water on Earth is salt water
Yeah,
and 30% is fresh water. So we have to protect and have fresh water available. You were speaking about the fires, and they ran out of fresh water. The hydrants went dry.
yeah,
So they had to use salt water. And fires are not generally or ever really, if they can avoid it, fought with salt water because it corrodes the equipment,
yeah,
but they were desperate to put out the fire because it was spreading, completely. So
yeah,
that's how they ended up putting it out. And it's not good for the soil, the
yeah,
salt, So there's so many bad things. And you were talking about the uh, produce coming from California. The Central Valley produces about 25% of what you're talking about for
yep,
the United States. And it's also exported. But, like you said, I mean, you're getting produce crates from California. And I give the Central Valley farmers a lot of credit because they know where the aquifers are. I have an aquifer map in my book, for kids to know about, learn about aquifers. And they have done their own catchment, digging trenches, flooding fields to recharge the aquifers. And then they can use that later to water their crops. And they
It,
did that.
yeah, it would be interesting though because people love to have salt on their produce. If that would actually work, if the salt water would work, it would be, but it's
I
not.
don't know.
I don't. It's not possible. So
That's a science experiment.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It'd be natural. It's like I think about when I boil my eggs, I always put salt in it because
Yeah.
then it just naturally has that flavor. So
Yeah.
let me ask you this. When you were 12 years old, what did you want to be when you grew up? What was your dream job?
Oh, it's weird. I wanted to be a lawyer, and the reason I had an affinity for kids who got into trouble, and I wanted to work with legally kids, that are in foster care or detention centers and help them, you know. And I ended up being a teacher, and it's not nice, but my friends used to joke, "Well, you got to work with juvenile delinquents anyway," but. And I did, and I love children. You mentioned children. The best people on earth are children.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
not spoiled yet.
yep,
And I truly rather be around kids than a group of adults.
yeah. I work, my day job is as an IT technician for a school district.
Oh, ah,
And my wife's an English teacher. She was a
oh,
fifth grade teacher for about 20 years and just went to high school recently. So I'm in the environment all the time. And I always think when I walk into these buildings, I love being in this environment because I used to work in companies
yeah,
in corporate America where it was just, it's,
yeah.
yeah.
No,
But
I
being
know.
in these incubators of like these young minds, it's like going on a college campus. You just feel this sizzle of energy of these dreams that are just kind of ready to take flight. But
That's right.
especially with kids, you just run into these little random moments.
Yeah.
Like I remember, and I'm a poet too, so these ideas will come into my
Oh.
head, and I see these. I remember this kid one time got an award for something, and he was in, and I think he injured himself. His leg was hurt. He was in a wheelchair. And I remember his shirt said, "My mom is my hero" or something. I'd never seen anything like that. And it's like
Yeah.
kids just always have these
Yeah.
very cerebral notions that
Yeah.
materialize in very magnanimous ways.
Yeah. My favorite grade to teach was fourth grade
Yeah.
because that is the year that they learn if taught correctly, that they can think, that
Yeah.
they can have ideas of their own. They're not little kids that have to wait for everybody, teachers, parents to tell them what to do. And you spoke about a moment. I had a girl in fourth grade, and we were doing junior grade books where there's no answers, it's just tagging on to other people's discussions, and learning to do that. And she raised her hand, and I called on her, and I could see her eyes rolling in the back of her head. She's like, I have an idea. I mean, I just saw it. And she spoke, and I didn't say anything other than just, thank you for adding, and she called on the next person. She turned out to be a merit scholar, and the merit scholars got to invite their favorite teacher to a banquet at the end of the year. And they had an anonymous paragraph that somebody read. And so you didn't know who it was about. She wrote about that moment. And I'm sitting in the audience, and I'm getting chills right now. I was getting chills. And I was like, that's me.
Yeah.
We never spoke about that moment. Never spoke about that moment. She
Wow.
remembered that moment. And so that's why I love fourth grade.
Yeah. Well, they're on the cusp too of becoming kind of teenagers. They're in that
Mhm.
really kind of
Yes.
gray, and that's the beauty of like because my wife and I got married in 2019, and in the years before, we had known each other for years. All of those kids remember me now, and they're in middle school and they're older, and it's kind of and she gets invited to weddings, and these
Yeah.
kids have kids, and it's like it's cool to see that kind
Yeah.
of chronological progression of life.
That's
It's fun.
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, no, I feel it. I feel
Yeah.
it. Yeah, and I would have kids come back and they'd say when they're older, "You were so strict, but you know," and I say, "Was I mean? No, you weren't mean, but you were just really strict because I made them learn to keyboard, you
Yeah,
know, properly, and we learned. I taught writing, you know, and thinking and writing, and other subjects, science, you know, and math, thinking in every subject." And they come back and say, "I'm so glad you were strict because it's helped me so much."
yeah,
You know,
yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So what were take me back to where you were born and raised. What were these foundational elements of becoming a writer, becoming a teacher, all of
Mhm.
these elements that have evolved into who you are today? How did this happen?
Yeah, I was born in the high desert, and then my dad was a miner, and we went around to different mining towns until I was in kindergarten, and then we settled in a mining town, a gypsum, U.S. gypsum mine in the Mojave Desert, Midland, and there were never ever over 1,000 people there, probably 750. And this is where this happened. That town had no well, but in the story, Waiting for the Water Train, I put a well in there because I wanted to have a spread that showed the aquifers and the groundwater and a well running dry. So one line in the story is the well was pumping mud, you know, so they had no water to drink. So they had to depend on the water train that came.
Yeah,
And sometimes the water train didn't come. So I learned because it's, you know, it's not I mean, it's fictionalized, but I learned water conservation and the preciousness of water early, you know, from the very start.
yeah,
And so the trigger for me to become a writer and write all of my life, but seriously during COVID, you know, it got serious was I was in seventh grade in Blythe, California, which is 22 miles from the little mining town where I was there until third grade, end of third grade. He gave us each a want ad, you know, like a personal ad, and he
yeah,
passed them all out, and they're all different. And you had to write a story that
yeah,
night. So the next morning, he reads mine out loud and I'm dying. I mean, I'm just, you know, practically crying. I was just like dying. I was in the front row. I'm short, so I always sat in the front row. I was overachiever. And he's reading it, and all of a sudden I hear sniffles, you know, and I turn around, and this girl that was known as a very, 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 very tough girl, you didn't cross her, you know, she
yep,
was crying.
wow,
And I said to myself, if I can make her cry,
yep,
I'm a writer, you
yeah,
know? And just the tag on that, it's kind of funny. There were tough girls in those days. You know, this is the 60s. There were tough girls and it smoked in the bathroom and kissed the mirror, stuff like that. I don't know if that happens anymore. I'm not in high school,
yeah,
but uh, they used to like get a little and they'd elbow you and you couldn't use the bathroom, so you'd have to go somewhere else, you know.
yeah,
After that, because she was the tough girl leader, they would go, you know, like just put their arm out like, yeah, go right ahead, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I got a free pass in the bathroom.
Oh, very cool. That's it. You got the red
Yeah.
carpet treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. What a great story. So let me ask you this. Um, Ultimately at the end of the day, talk to me a little bit about your book. Kind of get into it, get into what
Mhm.
the mission is,
Mhm.
because there is definitely a mission of
Mhm.
illuminating and educating. Talk to me about the book.
Yeah. Well, it's a title Waiting for the Water Train, and it is about a young girl who loves water play. And she makes overflowing bathtubs, you know, bubble baths and big giant mud puddles to make mud pies and just leaves the sprinkler on and runs through. She's, you know, just having a good time.
Yeah.
She's, you know, five, maybe 4 or 5. And her brother says, "You're a water waster." And it really hurts her feelings. And then the well runs dry. And so the water train comes and she goes back to what she always did. And then the water stops again and the water train's late. And so they're waiting. The family and other community members are waiting at the railroad tracks for the water train. And that's what the story's about. And she's tired of waiting. She's thirsty and she's regretting wasting water. She's hiding her face in her mom's skirt, you know. Uh, and finally, like the third train is finally the water train, but
Yeah.
two pass by. And so at the end, it ends really with an open-ended question. Emma knows what she needs to do, you know. So that's a discussion. How can you enjoy water play? What could she do to enjoy water play and not waste water? And in the book, I told you that there's a spread that shows the underground aquifers, groundwater, the well down, because that is one of my missions is for kids to learn where the water comes from, the aquifers and how important they are to keep clean,
Hmm.
and filled up, so that we have water. And because of course, there's environmental science and a water day and stuff like that in California, but there's nothing specifically, even in high school standards, about hydrogeology.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, and that's the tag onto future voters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's my mission, is
Yeah.
to educate children about hydrogeology, the preciousness of water. They pretty much get that,
Yeah.
they do, but they don't really know where it comes from. They think, okay, rivers,
Sure.
lakes, whatever, but they don't. Groundwater is really where we get most of it.
Yeah, for sure. So who's been your hero? Who's been your inspiration that's allowed you to become who you are today?
Both of my parents, but my mother was an inspiration. I always think of her as my roots. She loved me unconditionally. And no matter what I did, she lived with me 30 years before she passed, after my dad passed. And it was a wonderful experience. But my dad, I have to say, my mother was a teacher, but my dad was a miner. And every day, eh, he quit being a miner when I was in fourth grade, but uh, every day he labored for 8 hours
Yeah.
in this little mining town. And I called him the snowman because he would come home covered with gypsum. And he there was a laundry room in the back and a bathroom, and he would go take his clothes off, put them by the washer, go take a shower, put on his robe, come in the kitchen, and my mom had dinner ready. He would eat and talk to us for a while and go to bed. And the next morning before dawn, he would walk back to the mine.
Wow.
So he would do anything to support his family.
Yeah.
He did do anything to support his family.
Yeah.
And he loved being unconditionally also, but he was the one that where I got the strictness from. He was the strict, and it was all out of love. It was all out of love. He
Yeah.
he would do anything for me. And when I went to college, uh I always knew I had lovely, good parents, and I was so lucky. But when I went to college, I got a couple of little scholarships, but he's like the full ride. He says if it takes the last button off of Gabe's coat, you've heard that saying,
Yeah.
you're gonna be going to college and I don't want you to work. You're just gonna pay the dorm, everything. And I had friends that were smarter than me, and they talked to their parents, and their parents said, "Oh, you can go to community college or you can get a job." And
Right.
my dad sent me to 4 years of
Yeah.
college.
Yeah.
And I got my master's on his money,
Yeah.
and I got my PhD. It was after he died, long after, but I never had any debt,
Wow.
college loans, no debt.
Yeah.
So, and he did that. And this is funny. Is this for kids? Kids are listening.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a big group.
Well, I used to say, Daddy, why are you saving so much money? Like spend some, and he did. He spent it on us, but he'd get a new pair of Levi's and a couple of new shirts and a hat every year. That was his. That was it. That was his, what he wanted.
Yeah.
And I would say, why are you saving so much money? And he'd say, so your mom can have a jiggle after I die.
That's awesome. I love
I
that.
didn't even know what a gigolo was.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You have to look it up. Yeah. So speaking of the word and words, who's been your favorite author? Who was someone you admired growing up?
Uh, Well, I read, oh my gosh, Catcher in the Rye, A
Yeah.
Separate Piece. Uh, I lived, I walked home from high school and I stopped in the public library and I would do my homework there. And I just started reading in the young adult, just book after book. Uh, Favorite author? Well, I can't even think right now. I read so many. Oh, Thornton Wilder is
Yeah.
it who wrote Babbitt and that
Uh-huh.
whole, I read every book he wrote. You
Yep.
know, and that just, I was like, how could he write things like this?
Yeah.
I mean, I read Steinbeck and, all that.
Yeah.
And we were assigned, one of my teachers, unfortunately, killed Great Expectations. I mean, I hated it. Everybody hated it
Yeah.
because she was just like,
Uh-huh.
and we didn't get through the book. We didn't enjoy the story.
Yeah.
It was like, so, when I taught, I did not do that.
Yeah. No, I get it. I get it. So of everything that you've accomplished and evolved into in your life, what are you the proudest of?
I think just keeping going to school, going to school, going learning, being a lifelong learner. There you go, a lifelong learner. Because I'm a senior citizen and I took off on a writing career, as my second career.
Yeah.
And I have the second edition of The Water Train is coming out this month. And the second book that I wrote, it's another picture book about a woman who travels the world in a wheelchair, using a wheelchair. And she set a Guinness World Record for traveling to the most countries in a year using a wheelchair.
Wow.
So I read her blog during COVID, right? Because I'm like surfing the internet, and I read it, and I was like, "Oh, I'm blown away." So I emailed her and I said, "Can I write a picture book about you? Because I feel like kids need to know about you."
Yeah.
Because they do biographies, as you probably know, in second and fifth grade generally, and a lot of kids like biographies, you
Yeah.
know. And it's watercolor, it's a picture book, and it's a wonderful story about her time doing that, the year that she set the world record. Um, so it's not like a long biography. It's just the biography of that year, and it's coming out. And then a third book. Uh, it's about the conductor of our Pacific Symphony Orchestra that has is retiring after 35 years. And when he retire, he's doing concerts all over the world, but he's leaving the Pacific Symphony Orchestra. And I went to a birthday luncheon and he was telling the story about taking naps under his Aunt Lida's grand piano when from an infant until, and it was like the music got in him.
Yeah.
So I asked if I could write a picture book about him. And of course, he said yes. And so it's Carl St. Clair's Piano Naps and how he got into music, from a young age. And it's
Yeah.
also for kids, and it's in production now. The illustrator is a 17-year-old girl. Uh, Amazing.
Yeah.
And my other two books were illustrated by Svetlana Holovchenko, and she lives in Germany, and she's Ukrainian. She's wasn't in Ukraine when this all started, but her hometown is gone,
Yeah.
you know. But she went to art school in Russia, and she's just incredibly talented and so easy to work with, So
Yeah.
the journey that I set my first foot forward
Yeah.
during COVID, uh, it's just it's magical once you
Yeah.
get on the path.
Absolutely it is. So if
Yeah.
anyone wants to pick up your books and where they
Amazon.com.
okay, that's the best place. When if they
Yeah,
want to
and Barnes and Noble, all
okay.
the online, uh, they'll be in more small bookstores, there's not very many left, but they will be in small bookstores, but mostly online, like
Okay.
everything now.
Okay. And if they want to reach out, they want to learn more, anything more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, it's Virginia DeFrancisco Books.com
Okay. I will
is
put
my website.
Okay, I will put all of that in the show notes.
Yeah,
Virginia, this has been absolutely wonderful. I
yeah,
love when the dreams come true.
yes.
Thank you for your spirit. Thank you for your story, and best of luck.
And you're a poet and a writer, and you love IT. I mean, you're a Renaissance man.
I
I'm
do what I
impressed.
can. Just very interested in a lot of things. It's fun.
Yeah,
It's a lot of fun.
that's what you need to do.
It's it. It's great. So, well, this has been wonderful. Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank
much.
you so much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, you bet.
Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.